Hello everybody, this is Jim Feisty in Las Vegas, and Hank Goldberg's on the phone with me from sunny Florida. Good morning, Hank.
Hi Jim, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. I did not do well last night in college hoops, but you did.
I did okay. I liked Villanova and I liked Syracuse. They both came through. So there's some good games tonight. There's some pretty good opportunities in college hoops. I'll tell you, Temple is a very good team. They got a tough game tonight against Wisconsin, but I think Temple is very well coached. Wisconsin's come to their court, and that should be a good one. And Florida was surprised by Florida State. I couldn't believe Florida State beat Florida. That shocked me. And they come back tonight. I think they'll bounce back strong. They're going to be angry.
Well, I'm sure they will. Getting beat by their rival like that, yeah, they probably will be. Yeah, there's some good games out there tonight. Last night was there were really great matchups last night. Wisconsin, and you mentioned that game. Wisconsin's coming off that road victory over a conference opponent in Penn State, where everybody in the world was on Penn State in that game, and Wisconsin played their first good game of the year, actually. I mean, they've been very disappointing, but that game they played well, and they almost blew it at the end, but because Penn State came roaring back, but they held on for the victory. We got a full card of NFL, and Hank, I have to say, congratulations on your season so far in the NFL. You're in the contest here in Las Vegas. You're only a couple games out of first. You're doing great in the Review Journal. You're doing really bang-up job. I think last week in the NFL on Sunday you were 7-0, which I don't.
Yeah,
I don't think.
I went 5-0 in the contest last night. I went from 269th place to 239th place to 65th, and I'm only. I think I'm like 3 games out of 5th place right now. So I'd get another good week. I could be contention for a lot of money.
Oh yeah, they've got 4 more weeks, and do they carry that through the playoffs too, Hank, or is it just
no? It ends with the regular season.
Well, you got 4 more weeks. That's 20 picks. If you can get 15 or 16 victories out of those 20, I think you might win the whole thing.
Oh, that's all. Okay.
Yeah, but well, that's what you've been doing. I mean, I'm just asking you to do what you've been doing. So.
Well, I had 2, 3, and 2 weeks leading into the 5-0, so it's tough. And now it gets tough because, for example, there's a game this week where Cleveland is playing a contender. And Cleveland is not playing bad defense right now. They got their best offensive player back, who hadn't been with them all year, and he had a big game last week. And they haven't quit on their coach. And they covered last week against the Chargers. And you can't take anything for granted in this game. There's a good example.
Well, that's for sure. I mean, these teams do. Each player is playing for their job. I mean, not all these guys are guaranteed to be on the rosters the next week or the next year. So they are playing for their jobs, and they do play hard. And you're right. Cleveland has.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, Cleveland has played well at times. They just don't finish the games off. Many times they've actually been in position to win at the end of the game. And they'll come into the third quarter in the last 10 minutes of the game, and they'll be ahead, and somehow they'll lose the game and then not cover. I mean, last week's cover was unusual for them. It's been a 70% betting against them almost every week. But last week they did cover.
I'll tell you a game that I think is interesting to me. There's a good possibility that Dallas is going to get Lee back. Now they go into the Meadowlands to play the Giants. And the Giants are celebrating the fact that their coach is gone and Eli is back. Is that a big deal that Eli is back? He has not played well. And, you know, he doesn't have his receivers, and they don't run the ball very well, and they got a lousy offensive line, and none of that has changed. And Dallas is right back where they were when they were winning every week. They got, you know, their offensive line is back in business. I think they have the right tackle is questionable, but he's not practicing. But he didn't practice last week, and he played. But if Lee is back there, it makes a difference of something like 100 yards in defense to them against the run per game. And it would help their pass rush. And Eli will be under siege again. So, and Dallas, you know, the Giants usually play well against Dallas, but the Giants stink. And Dallas has got a chance to make the playoffs if they win out. So, you know, they're going to show up. And people are acting like, oh, this is great. I've heard people say, well, you know, if the Giants can finish strong, they can lay foundation for next year. Come on. Well, you know something, that's true. The Giants do have a lot of good defensive players, but they got to go out and get some offensive linemen, and, you know, they'll get those receivers back next year. And if, you know, I don't know what a new coach is going to want to do there, but, you know, they can't be any more poorly coached than they have been all year.
Well, there's no question there's a lot of turmoil. General manager, coach, and a quarterback change. Very strange season in New York. A lot of people thought the Giants could win. At the beginning of the season, a lot of people thought the Giants could win that division. They're not even close to that. Dallas, of course, has had the injuries and Ezekiel Elliott out. They're not the same team without him, but they're a lot better when they have Lee at on defense and their left tackle back, and they're both back. Should they be?
Well, they ran. By the way, they ran the ball last week very well.
Yeah, they did.
Their offensive line, when it's intact, is very good.
There's no question. The biggest issue I have is, I mean, the odds makers made this game, they opened at 6, Dallas 6. It's been bet down to 4 or 4.5. So a lot of money have come in on Giants. I see what you're saying, but it is strange because the Giants are not a good team. And you're asking a bad team to step up for you, but you're asking, you know, just in the Cleveland game also, you're asking a bad team to step up for you. And so in both cases, you have two bad teams there. It's a hard, the way this league has been going, and you know it, you're picking more winners in pro football than anybody. There's been a lot of favorites covering. Until last week, the favorites have been just absolutely killing it. Last week, the dogs got some of the money.
Well, there was a run for 2 or 3 weeks here where the favorites did well. Prior to that, the dogs were doing well. So it's been up and down now. You know, the books were cleaning up there at one point for about 4 weeks in a row, and then there was a 2 to 3 week run where the favorites were winning. And, you know, some of that has been an adjustment of the lines based on what people are seeing and wise guy money and whatnot. But there's been some movement in some of the games this week already. And I think, you know, the game tomorrow night is interesting to me.
Very interesting. It's a big game.
It's a good game. Atlanta, though, has not been good at home this year. They have lost, 3 games at home? They haven't been a good investment at home. And it looks like New Orleans is going to have both of their corners back. I know one of the running backs may not be able to go. Well, he hasn't been practicing. But the other guy, who's amazing, you got two running backs who are going to be over 1,500 yards each. And the fact of the matter is, Saints are better. They're just better. Last week, Atlanta was shut out. The quarterback didn't throw a touchdown pass against Minnesota. Now, I'm not suggesting that the Saints' defense is as good as Minnesota's defense is, but Atlanta has not been consistent this year, and I know you don't like their offensive coordinator. And he hasn't been great. They haven't responded to him in a lot of games this year. And it's, what's the game? Pick 'em now?
Actually, the Saints have gone to a 1.5-point favorite.
Yeah, there's been a lot of line movement in that game.
Yeah, there has. There has, and there's been quite a big movement on the total too. It's gone from 55 down to 53. But the Saints are not the same team as they used to be. They run the ball a lot. They got great running backs. The offensive line opens holes, and Breeze doesn't have to throw the ball all the time. So they have pretty good balance. In Atlanta, Atlanta mirrors the same. They have the running backs. They get a lot of yards. When they're healthy, they get a lot of yards on the ground. But they're not the same clubs that they were. They're a little bit more balanced. Atlanta just is not. They're just not on their feed this year. The loss of Shanahan and the switch to Sarkisian has made a big difference. I'm not, or maybe it's the Super Bowl hangover. It's not too many teams that lose a 28-3 lead and just haven't overcome that somehow mentally. They have been a big disappointment this year. Now losing to Minnesota is not a. There's no shame.
Something they won 3 games in a row, and everybody thought, well, they've got it straightened out. But look at the 3 teams they beat.
Beat nobody.
Yeah.
Yeah, against a good competition, there's no question the Saints are the better football team. And even the opening line would tell you that. They opened Atlanta 2. And even that line, it doesn't give Atlanta the full home court advantage, which would make them 3 or 4. So right there it tells you that Saints were the better football team coming into the week. Now the marketplace has taken it a little bit further, and the money has come in on New Orleans.
Well, what bothers me about the Saints this week is to having to travel on a short week. Teams that have had to travel on Thursday nights have not done well. And, that's a factor in Atlanta's favor. So that makes it a little bit of a tough call. I will not use this game in the contest. But it should be a good game. And, these two teams don't like each other very much. But, the other game is now all of a sudden people are looking at Philadelphia and they're saying, well, Philadelphia, they're 1-2 against teams with plus 500 record. Now they got to go up against the Rams second week in a row on the road on the West Coast. And maybe Philadelphia was overrated a little bit. Well, but in the power ratings, they were number 1 going into last week. Now they dropped a little bit.
One of the problems with Philadelphia was and one of the reasons I liked Seattle last week, Philadelphia overall for the season going into the Seattle game had faced the 29th rated defense collectively in the league. So they've had a softer schedule, and they ran into a buzzsaw last week with Seattle. But had the Philadelphia Eagles not made some of the mistakes they made in the game, like the fumble at the goal line, etc., that game could have turned out a lot better. The difference here is, though, that the Rams' defense is healthy. Seattle's defense was not. And the Rams have been rolling. I mean, they are not a bad football team. They lost that one game in the middle against Minnesota, which was, there's no shame in that game because Minnesota's really good. This is a tough grind for Philadelphia being on the West Coast this long. It saves you the travel, but it's also you're living out of the suitcase, which is never easy.
These are the 2 highest scoring teams in the league playing each other.
And yet, the total went from 51 to 49. Figure that.
Well, it's because the Eagles were shut down last week.
Yeah, well, they were, but they made a few mistakes. A couple interceptions and the fumble. That should have been a higher scoring game had those things not happened. But things like that happen in all games. It might come down to the coaching here. The Rams coaching staff is getting a little, a lot of people are talking about what a great job they're doing out there, and sitting at home 2 straight weeks. It might, it's an interesting line on this game. It opened 2. There's one place that has it 1, which I don't understand, and everybody else has a 2.5. So maybe that's just a line that it just hasn't come up on the screen right. But it's looking at 2.5. I'm going to say is probably the right line for the Rams here. 49 is the total.
Well, the Rams' defense is very good too. And they've got a good pass rush.
Hold on, Hank. Okay, we can go again. Had a little interference from the guard dog. We got a great Sunday night football game too. We got Baltimore going to your favorite team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, with your favorite quarterback. That game was originally.
That game moved too. That game went from 7 to 5.
It did.
And I guess the injury to Shazier and the suspension of Juju is probably the reason for that.
Yeah, this is Baltimore always plays this team tough. This is a tough. The most physical game for Pittsburgh every year is the Cincinnati game, and then, well, I shouldn't say physical. The dirtiest game for Pittsburgh is Pittsburgh and Cincinnati every year. They just play dirty football when they play together. They must really hate each other. But Baltimore is a very physical team, and they've always had a physical matchup. This is going to be a war. This is always a big game in the AFC North, and it's going to be a big one Sunday night. This is going to be a good game to watch. I'm kind of excited to watch. Some of these games this week are really. We're getting down to crunch time, so these games are very meaningful, and you're getting the best efforts out of these teams. I'm sure the Philly and the Rams are going to put it together. Baltimore and Pittsburgh are going to put it together. There's a lot of good games. Let's talk a little bit about a team that's not playing well, and I have some strong opinions on the nonsense that's been going on in Denver. I think John Elway, when John Elway considers firing people, maybe he should look at himself. He has done an absolutely horrible job since their Super Bowl winning year. The coaches that he's hired and the quarterbacks that he's brought in, for a guy that knows football and played so well for so long, I'm shocked at how bad of a job he's done.
Well, first of all, one note about Baltimore. They've lost Jimmy Smith, which is going to affect their defense a little bit going up against Pittsburgh. They'll miss him out of their secondary. Elway has, I don't know how he could have hired this coach. And the coach is going to be gone one and done. I've said this on the show before. He was the defensive coordinator for the Dolphins last year, and the Dolphins ranked last in every defensive coordinator, every defensive category. So Vance Joseph becomes the head coach of the Broncos, and then they throw the offensive coordinator under the bus when he has no quarterback to work with. It's absurd. But, they've, you got to give Elway a chance to get things straightened out there. And I think, they'll find a quarterback somehow in the offseason. There's going to be plenty available. And they still have enough defensive talent. And if he gets a good coach in there, they can turn it around quickly.
It's hard to believe that the Jets, where everybody said the Jets were going to lose all 16 games this year, have actually played pretty well, play hard every week, and now they're favored at Denver, which is absolutely, if you'd have said this 12 weeks ago, nobody would have believed it could happen.
Well, they're only a slight favorite. I guess the game is kind of a toss-up.
If this game was week 1, Denver would have been 14.
Yeah, well, the Jets that coach has done a great job. You know, he changed his offensive staff, and they've done a terrific job. And the quarterback has played well, and they've got some good young defensive talent, and nobody saw that coming. They have a good young general manager who's and that's what a good general manager will do. And so I think, you know, now they're saying, I read in one of the New York papers, they were considering giving the head coach a contract extension, and they're saying, oh, not so fast. Let's wait till the end of the season. But he has done a terrific job. And Morton, the offensive coordinator who they brought in to replace Chan Gailey, has done a great job. And they've got a good quarterback coach there who I know, and he's done a great job with that quarterback who can play. And so, you know, the Jets right now are a much better team than Denver is, and you know, they're scoring a bunch of points, and the defense gave up a lot of points to Kansas City last week, but and, you know, that was a real shootout, but they prevailed. So that'll be interesting to see what the Jets do at Denver. I'm staying away from that game because going on the road to Denver, you know, could be a little bit of a challenge for them. But who's going to play quarterback next week? Is it Simeon again?
Yeah, it probably has to be him. Yeah. Yeah.
It's awful.
He has definitely not played well this year. That's for sure. I don't think anybody thinks he's anything more than a game manager, but he hasn't even done that well this year. Well, Hank, we've covered most of the games. Anything else you want to cover before we sign off?
Kansas City is, you know, that division is up in the air right now. You got 3 teams with 6 wins, and Kansas City is playing the Raiders. And, you know, Kansas City has beaten the Raiders 4 of the last 5 times they've played. And the Raiders, I don't know if they're full strength in their passing game or not, but I can say this about the Raiders. I think they have 1 interception all year. Their pass defense is dreadful. Now, Alex Smith is coming off a game where he actually threw for 4 touchdowns last week against the Jets. I think he's going to perform well at home against the Raiders this week. This is, you know, this is a chance for the Chiefs to, you know, turn their season back on a positive note against a team they can beat. And the Raiders haven't traveled well this year. They've been not a good team on the road. I saw a guy on the NFL channel talking about, oh, the Raiders are, you know, back. They've won 2 or 3 games in a row right now. But they have won 2 or 3 games on the road. And you know, one of them was against Kansas City, where the officials won the game for them. That's some terrible calls that went against Kansas City in that game. And so Kansas City's going to remember that. I think they'll be fired up. Andy Reid has given up the play calling, and I think that's worked out. Kansas City's just got to play a little bit better defense, or a lot better defense. And I think, you know, Beast Mode had a big game last week. Can he put 2 games together? So far, he hasn't been able to do that. I think the Raiders right now are not a good football team.
No, they were very overrated. Almost like the opposite of the Jets. The Jets were thought to lose all their games this year, and people were taking prices on that. And a lot of people thought that Oakland would have had a possibility to get to the Super Bowl. I mean, it's still possible, but they haven't played that well. And
well, I like Jack Del Rio, but he hasn't done a good job. And you know, I like Andy Reid too. I don't know what's happened with that Kansas City team. That young running back started off great, and he hasn't done very much. But they have guys on that offense who can play. You know, number 10 is a very versatile player. They've got speed. They've got decent special teams. They can make big plays. But they make so many mistakes. They got to cut down on the penalties. And if they can do that, they could be in for a big week.
Yeah, it's one of those things in the NFL that does happen. You get these turnarounds. I mean, they've lost 6 out of 7 games, which is kind of remarkable after starting off 5-0. But Like you said, they did change who calls the plays. Now, last week they put up a lot of yards, a lot of scores. You know, I still think Alex Smith is pretty damn good, and so I'm looking for Kansas City to bounce back as well. More
Disagrees.
Well, you know, he's a dog player, of course, but in this case, I think he heard what you said and he liked it. So I think he's on Kansas City this week.
Okay.
Hank, it's been fun, informative, and everybody out there, I want to tell you, nobody is picking more winners in the NFL than Hank Goldberg. Go to the JimFeist.com website and buy his plays. You will not be sorry. This guy is red hot. He knows what he's doing. JimFeist.com and buy Hank Goldberg's picks. Thanks, Hank. We'll talk to you again in a couple days.
Thank you.
Okay, bud.
Okay.
Thank you.